Hey everybody, I'm back from my little vacation. Although to you guys it didn't seem like anything. It was, I uploaded a video in advance. Once again, I feel like I say this just about every video. But this one might be a little bit shorter, and this one for good reason. I realized the script was significantly shorter when I wrote it, because what we're going over Life is Strange True Colors cut content as well as its theories. And because of how recent the game came out, as well as the fact that it was released all at once, the episodes weren't, it wasn't one episode and then a break and then another episode like previous installments of the series. This was all at once. And so it took out a lot of what made Life is Strange 1, 2, even Before the Storm, as popular as they were, because the community came together to solve these mysteries and come up with their own theories, and that's what makes, I feel, a Life is Strange game and its community feel so special. That definitely made this a bit more difficult. There's a lot less to go at, so that might be brief. With the cut content, not much is really known except for some concept art. However, ultimately, I'm kind of disappointed. This is one of my favorite game in the series, if I have to be honest. So I'm just disappointed that it didn't really get the chance to get the love that it deserves. And I hope in the future the episodes do come out, with breaks in between, because I feel like that fosters such a strong community. And before I start this, I want to say a major thank you to everyone who subscribed. I'm at 1,000 subscribers now, over 1,000. This is something that I never, ever thought I would do. I tried to release smaller videos, like gaming videos. For a minute, it was terrible. And I never thought I would make it beyond that. I didn't think it was in the cards for me. And then I found this niche, and I found this audience. And I really appreciate all of you who come back to the videos. I'm seeing how you guys have sort of embraced me with, no prior content, minimal editing, and a lot of talking, and you've just kind of embraced that, and a lot of people have stuck around, and it really, it means a lot to me, more than you know, and I hope I can do this for a long, long time, because I love it. So thank you, and let's get into this. So without further ado, let's discuss some cut content and theories from Life is Strange True Colors. So first, let's start with some cut content. This is widely known, but the original code name for Life is Strange 3, or True Colors, was Siren. It's labeled as both within its early files. So first we have some cut content about the My Block feature, which was originally called Face Me. It's sort of the social media program in Life is Strange True Colors. Another thing is that at one point, it appeared that there was going to be a map feature on Alex's phone. This could have been useful for sequences where you're in the town and you have to go, you can go to the flower store and then you can go here, and it's a bit more open, so it might have helped players. But I guess in the end, they must have scaled down the openness, because I personally don't feel that a map would be necessary for how small of an area it is. There's also an old objectives list from what would have been probably Chapter 1. Here's the list of objectives that were ultimately cut. So we have meet Gabe at the bus stop, find the record store and speak to Skip, go to the Black Lantern and find Gabe, head over to Gabe's girlfriend's house, purchase some camping gear to find Ethan. So it also appears that Ethan's sort of adventure was going to last a little longer, or maybe he goes to a different spot that ultimately leads to Gabe's death. Here's one for all the Before the Storm fans out there, and the very, very small Skip fandom. Comment below if you're a skipper. But basically it appears in the files that Skip was going to be the returning character from Before the Storm, not Steph. And this seems like a strange choice, and it's certainly possible that they used Skip's name as sort of a placeholder as they figured out who they should actually bring back. He would be interesting, although I don't think he would have much depth without someone who was also from Arcadia Bay being there. Maybe he could have given a few comments about David Madsen or Mark Jefferson if he met him at the time before he ended up leaving Blackwell. It's definitely interesting. I do think ultimately they went the right way with choosing Steph because Steph is a very interesting character. I know personally I can't really get behind her romance option. That's a whole other thing. Side tangent. I really think that Ryan's romance option is better, and that's not just because I am also a blonde guy. It's because I feel like the whole point of Alex's story is that she's never had a real home, and the one home she had in her brother, she lost. Both of her parents passed away, and she had no home. So by being with Ryan and staying within this community, I feel like that wraps up her story a lot better than leaving with Steph. Sorry, side tangent. Where was I? It also appears that at some point you were able to visit Charlotte's home, like it was on your objectives list. And something funny that I noticed is that you don't see any of the characters' homes, really, with the exception of Alex's brother, Gabe. You don't get to see any of their homes, which sounds kind of odd when you're saying it out loud, considering it's supposed to be this small town. There's also some really, really cool concept art of what the radio station was originally going to be. It was originally going to be connected to an old mine shaft, like an old mining building, I guess you could say, not a mine shaft. And it sounds really cool. The concept art is really cool. However, ultimately it didn't end up happening. We also have the interior of the radio station as well, which I think it's really interesting, and it's certainly, from an aesthetic point of view, is awesome. But ultimately, it doesn't really mesh well into the story, and I guess ultimately they decided it was better to put it in the record store. So that's it for the content. There's really not much. It seems like at this point Deck 9 had sort of ironed out what they wanted from the series. So now we're going to be getting into some of the pre-release theories. So, obviously, the biggest theory that people had before this game released is that Max, Chloe, Sean, Daniel, basically any of the previous main characters from the other Life is Strange games would return in some capacity. This was proven incorrect that they would actually show up, but in Wavelengths, Steph talks about Chloe and their voices can be heard, as well as Arcadia Bay and Max kind of being mentioned if Arcadia Bay is sacrificed. So they are mentioned in passing, but they don't show up and have a big cameo. I remember when Wavelengths was announced, I was really on the train of that, well, Chloe has to show up, that just makes sense. But, you know, it didn't end up happening. And honestly, it might be for the better, and especially since we have Double Exposure coming out later. And before Wavelengths, which I previously mentioned, came out, a lot of people theorized when they said that one of Steph's old friends was going to come. I was in the boat that it was Chloe, as I said, but in reality it was Mikey, and obviously this was confirmed. A lot of people thought it would be Mikey because they were actually very, very close, so I think that's very interesting. So Gabe's death was revealed in the trailer, which, honestly, not a huge fan of, but we'll get to that in the end. And people debated on whether or not it truly was an accident, or if, you know, someone else was responsible for it. And ultimately this is proven correct because we know about the, you know, mining explosion, things like that. This is sort of basic and kind of blanket, but a lot of people thought that the characters introduced would have some sort of ulterior motives, and maybe one of them was somehow responsible. And this was proven correct in the end. But I feel like that's such a blanket thing. I really did struggle to find concrete theories for this. I looked at the Steam forums, I looked at Reddit, and this game truly doesn't get the love it deserves. And I do believe that a lot of that is because of the schedule, or the way it released. Because this game was developed by Deck 9, and they had their hands in a lot of the other Life is Strange games, people believed that your choices from those games would affect this story, which ultimately it didn't. It does slightly in Wavelengths if you sacrificed Arcadia Bay or not, but some people thought from the trailer that Alex would discover her powers as the story went along, that the emotional stress and trauma from losing her brother would bring out this ability, which we know is incorrect, because she, you know, we begin the game and she knows how to use her powers and, you know, that kind of thing. Which, it's more, it really depends on which side you're on. we are typically used to characters who are discovering their powers for the first time and how they deal with them. Whereas with Alex, she understands the ramifications of using her powers for getting what she wants, for manipulating people. She understands that it's bad, and we know that from her internal monologue, but ultimately it's up to the player to decide on whether or not if this situation is something for her to push those boundaries on, which I think brings a unique perspective. It's not like Life is Strange, where when the player first starts it, the first one, where they're like, oh, there's not really much that's happening. I can just rewind and do whatever I want. Oh, that's so cool. But we get internal monologues from Alex saying, I don't think I could take away her anger, but I shouldn't. And I think that's a very interesting dynamic to have, and I hope we see more of that in Double Exposure with Max now understanding her time travel abilities. Some people thought that, if there was an incident with Alex's powers when she was younger, that's how she would end up in foster care, but we know that's incorrect. There was an interesting idea that Alex herself somehow killed Gabe with her powers inadvertently. This sort of plays into the idea that Alex is just discovering her powers, and imagine that. That is such a dark way to put it. You discover these powers, you try to use them to solve the death of your brother, and ultimately come to the conclusion that it's your fault. I mean, that's just that's dark even by Life is Strange 2 standards. That's insane. And I'm glad they didn't go that route, because I honestly love the tone and how lighthearted True Colors can be, and how it's really one of my all-time cozy games, I guess, which is weird to say about a Life is Strange game, I guess, but I think that's a fairly common sentiment about at least the first one. This one is something very interesting that I think I would like to see it in a game, but not a Life is Strange game. So the idea is that based on your choices, who you investigated, things like that, the idea is that based on your choices, it would be someone different who is responsible for Gabe's death. So it's almost like the Clue movie, how there were multiple different endings put out so there's no true ending. Depending on your actions, the game would then decide on, well, narratively, who is the best antagonist here. Which is interesting, but I feel like for a Life is Strange game, where it's all about player choice, and players want to feel rewarded for making the right choices, or guessing the clue, or analyzing the theory, whatever it is, it would feel kind of hollow, because in the end, well, it doesn't matter. Just, if I click A or B, it decides if it's him or him. Which is why, like I said, I'd like to see that in a different game, just not a Life is Strange game. And this last pre-release theory, we're going to end it on sort of a crackpot kind of idea. What if it's possible that Gabe faked his own death? No, he didn't fake his own death. That's stupid. I'm not even gonna, what... No. No. We don't talk to him. That's the conspiracy theorist. No, we're done. So, in terms of post-release theories, there's not much. The story sort of wraps itself up in a neat bow. There's no major plot holes that come to mind. One of the big questions, though, that people had is, why isn't Riley an option, like a dateable option? And this came out of some dissatisfaction with Steph's storyline as a romantic interest, which I completely understand. And a lot of people, me included, I can see why they didn't. It might have been a lot to have 3 different love interests, and including Riley more in the story, but a lot of people point to their interactions as being somewhat flirtatious or having some sort of romantic tension behind them, which, I don't know, maybe I'm a hopeless romantic, but I see it. So because there weren't many post-release theories, because as I said, the game released all at once, so this is sort of a what if it did release episodically, what theories would people have had when each episode releases, and I'm sorry if this is disappointing. The fact is, they're just it's a pretty cut and dry game about, the story is pretty cut and dry. There's not really much else to go into, frankly, and that's very disappointing. So let's get into it. So obviously, a lot of questions. What do the songs really mean? Analyzing the lyrics. That's something that I remember at the end of every episode of Life is Strange 1, Life is Strange 2, and even mostly in Before the Storm, listening to Daughter's songs at the end of that, especially because they made the music for the game, you knew it was intentional. So it was something I really thought about and wanted to look into, when it was coming out. So here's some questions from episode 1. Who did Gabe talk to on the phone? Why did the blast still go off? I feel like this would be the biggest question out of this episode and would drive a lot of the theories about who may be responsible and why they would go through with this kind of thing. Is it possible for Alex to forgive Ryan? And obviously on the forums, people would be asking, has anyone beaten Minehaunt? Are there any, sort of hidden messages within the game? Because that seems like a prime opportunity for that. So for episode 2, people would probably be asking, why is Diane sad? Are we going to tell anyone else about our power? Will we gain any more abilities as we continue the series? Will we see Mac again? And will he sort of be an ally if we were nice to him? And really it's just a lot of, what does the future hold kind of questions. So episode 3 is when it really gets interesting. What is Typhon hiding? What was the correct decision on Charlotte and why? Sort of whether or not you change her emotions or not. And I feel like this would be a really big point of contention in the fan base because it's a very, very tough situation. Something that might fly under the radar. However, ultimately it probably would become one of the biggest whoa revelations by the end of it is Jeb secretly the villain based on the LARP roleplay, the foreshadowing with that, with him being the villain, which ultimately we know is true. It's very interesting. I think that would have been something that, it would be one of those theories that people would go, no, that doesn't make sense. It was just a roleplay thing. And then people would prove it to be true and they'd be like, oh God, what? So episode 4, the last episode that would have theories, since, there's nothing after episode 5, so let's get into that. So is Alex alive, or will we be playing as a different character? And that might sound a little over the top, however, that's become a more common trend in recent games. You see that a lot in, The Last of Us when they fake out Joel's death. In the Telltale Walking Dead games, it's not uncommon to switch character perspectives. And especially with having a returning character like Steph, who the audience knows a lot about, it wouldn't be too unrealistic to switch over to her perspective for a little bit. Or even, what it could be, depending on who you are romancing more, Ryan or Steph, whoever you have more affinity with, you would get to control for a little bit. There would be a lot of why, is Jed doing this? What is going on? Is there any way he could be forgiven or excused for this? Which sounds outrageous, but I feel like, me personally, I liked his character up until the twist. I thought he was a very not interesting necessarily, but a likable character. Someone who felt familiar and felt like he could really be from this town. And I feel like I would be asking myself, okay, there's got to be some explanation, which ultimately there isn't. He's kind of evil. But I feel like that would be a big question, as well as how the heck is Alex going to be able to survive that? What angle was the gun shot at that she could have survived that? God, I need a haircut. I look like a Leon Kennedy knockoff. But yeah, ultimately, a lot of questions about the fate of Alex and trying to put together previous hints about what could have happened and why this is all happening, and maybe even some questions about Alex family. But that's all we got for this video. I know it's probably a shorter one, otherwise I will put in another meme making fun of myself for incorrectly guessing again. Yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Remember, I post a lot on the community tab. Most recently, I announced that I would be covering my favorite game, one of my favorite games of all time, which some of you have noticed the stickers on my computer, but the game Night in the Woods, which is one of my all-time favorites. I want to cover theories from that. I want to cover content, especially while I am playing and recording the Oxenfree Let's Plays, because I realized it doesn't make much sense for me to be uploading Oxenfree videos as I'm playing the game and releasing those weekly. Which, speaking of those are going to be about an hour a piece. I'm just going to sit down and play the game, not going to be much editing. I'll have a face cam, and I will upload those probably on Wednesdays to tide you guys over until my next theory video. And yeah, that's what's going to be up for a little bit. Please subscribe if you can. I really appreciate everyone for watching, and good evening, good night, good morning, whatever.